here we are, sewing friends. Okay, so making hot pads, but basically they have 2 layers of this thermal batting in there. So it's just like quilting because the thickness of the material. Use a walking foot, so I'm on the industrial, so I have the walking foot built in versus a Singer you want to add to it. But tips and tricks: staple together. You can use pins, but I always have a hard time keeping everything even, so staples work just as good. Better in my case. So right now I have some trying to make some even stitching, then I'll turn it to go the other way. This is actually a half piece, so it's going to eventually look like this. There's a binding going around here. But to get the stitch spacing, this is 1.25 inches, so it's 1/4 inch from here to here. And so I align the existing stitch line on the 1-inch mark and then butt it up there and run it through, and gives it 1.25 inch spacing. So here we are. I am just showing you how I'm using the acrylic ruler to get my even stitch spacing. And the important thing here is to make sure your line on the ruler stays on line with the stitch that you previously stitched in, but then also it stays tight to the edge of the presser foot as it goes down. So my eye is not on the needle going up and down, it's on the guide to make sure it's staying on. Once you feel comfortable, you can speed it up a little bit. And you don't have to put a lot of pressure on holding this. You don't have to do back stitching here, but I guess I was afraid of the thread coming out. So I just wanted to do a quick comment here. So I did bring this last row pretty close here. The binding, when it comes on here, is going to stick in about 1/2 inch, so there won't be much of this shown here, but it's important to try to get out here because as you're sewing the binding on, it's going to push the material and it could bound out at one of the edges. Like you can kind of see here, as I was sewing this down, it was pushing the material and gathering here. So that's usually what happens when you're binding. Also, it pushes the material and then it could gather at a corner here. And I could experience that on this edge here, but I'm too lazy to stitch it right now, and so I'm just going to go for it. So, working with the 2-inch wide double fold for a finished hem attachment, and for an industrial machine, I guess, more than domestic. The best thing for loading these is always somewhat difficult, but I've learned that the longer you make this cut, instead of just at a 45 or trying to put a square in, a lot easier it is to feed in there. So sometimes I can do this while it's attached to the machine, but I can take it on and off pretty easily. So I always put the straight edge up on top first, put it in. You want to try to keep that near the top there, and it's going to fold it over at that location, but I just start pushing it in here. And the biggest problem that I usually have, you also want to make sure this stays near that top edge there as you're feeding it in. And you can kind of see it, hopefully, feeding in underneath here, and it's starting to fold. And so you got the first one, and of course I pulled it off there. There it is, it starts to fold right there. But then watching the second one fold also, and you can usually see that from underneath, and so that's why it's sometimes easier to do this while it's off the machine. But you can usually see it, and there you go, you got the double fold. So now it's all set to go. I'm going to get mounted and we'll take off. So I got the binder attached to the machine base here. Sometimes I've gone with just one screw on here, but depending on how much material you're pulling through here, this will actually rotate on you if it's not tight enough. I've been meaning to switch out these two screws because the heads are too big and they rub together, so as you tighten one it'll unscrew the other, so you're going to kind of do them, alternate them back and forth. So we have a 1/2 inch, it's about 1/4 inch to this edge right here. I'm going to hold this back a little bit. I'm not too concerned about holding it as close as possible, that edge. So yeah, let's give it a whirl here. Unfortunately, I have to set you off to the side and zoom back out so I can handle this. Let me see if I can zoom back in here. Yeah, put the presser bar down. I'm not going to back stitch on that one because it's going to be buried in when I attach it to the other piece and cord it. So I'm always watching my feet in here to make sure it's not getting crumbled. So I've used this with ripstop nylon, and so you got to practice with each material you get. The nylon, I actually got to almost run it in at more of an angle. It's just because of the nature of the beast. It doesn't want to necessarily feed through. And I need to pay attention to my material going in there.